America was and what it can become. This is Liberty Town Hall.
Welcome to Liberty Town Hall. Today we're discussing property rights and what kind of rights you really have to your land. In previous segments, when we had Ken and Tom on the show, we talked about the history of property rights. We talked about the Frostbite Convention and how that plays in and what happened here in this one state versus other states across the country. They're in very similar shape. So today we're going to get into more of the details. Welcome back, Ken. Tom, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jurisdiction on property rights. Who really has the jurisdiction?
When you look at jurisdiction, it's who controls the land that you stand on and who controls where your feet stand.
Well, if I own it, I control it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, you control it. But if you allow somebody to tread on that.
So I can go build a house if I want without permission because I own it, it's my house,
Absolutely.
my property?
It's your property.
I think building inspectors and permit people might think it's a little bit different.
Well, they love to think that because that's all they've been indoctrinated in and have not discovered the history of our great nation and the people that we have here and where that history has brought us and how jurisdiction plays a great role in what we do within our own property with what we do. You can probably remember years ago your father saying, "My home is my castle."
Right.
Whose jurisdiction was there? It was your dad's.
It was my dad's. I'll tell you that right now. In that house, it was my dad's jurisdiction.
And he had big feet.
Oh.
And he knew where they stood.
I felt it numerous times if I didn't comply with his wishes on that. But today we have big government. Like, for example, a lot of people are saying that we don't really own our land anymore because if we don't pay taxes for a year or two, then they'll come and take it and auction it away, and we don't really have it. So how do we actually own land if we have to pay rent or taxes every year, time and time again, or it's taken from us no matter how much equity we have in it?
You have to go back to the history of the republic and of the state, and this conflict of ownership and responsibility has been abused and used against us in its ignorance to what is right and wrong. The state and the federal government have a need and a right of taxation.
Right.
But the taxation has to be limited and fall within the criteria of the constitutions.
Absolutely.
Now, at the federal level, in order to be sure they had revenue, they gave the ports of entry, and in an extreme case, they gave them a direct tax upon the states.
Yes.
That does not deny the state to also impose a direct tax, which would be upon the land itself and the appurtenances, i.e. the improvements. But in our state, as in all the other 49 states, no state has ever imposed a direct tax.
So there is no direct tax by rule or statute in this state or any other state that you know of, yet if we don't pay our property tax, then we don't own our land. We're kicked off it pretty quick.
Well, that's where you step into what's called a legal fiction, a systemic fraud.
So wait a minute, how do they get away with this then? If it's not legal and everybody's doing it, I mean, you go talk to my township treasurer and assessor, and they'll be happy to tell you that they have all the legal right to do this.
Well, you have contemporaneous wrongs, historical wrongs becoming contemporaneous rights. And when you were taught the wrong is right, and I come along and tell you the right is wrong, who's crazy?
Me. I'm crazy.
Well, we're going to get into who's right or who's wrong and who's crazy and who's not when we return after these messages. Be right back. And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. We're discussing the Constitution, who owns rights of land, who doesn't. Guys, if this has been basically a fraud against the public to collect taxes that are not legal, what do we do?
Well, let's go back to the beginning again and the revision back theory. When you have a piece of property and it belongs to you and it's your property,
Right.
all right? That property, from the day that the state granted it to the federal government and the federal government sold it to somebody under a patent,
Right. We talked about this in the earlier episode. That's why we make sure.
Absolutely.
Patents versus deeds. There's a big
Under
difference.
color of law.
Under color of law is a big difference.
The paramount ownership is the patent. But you have to have this string. And the string has to go from the beginning to today. And that string can't be looped down. It has to be tight. So you have to know what, where, when, why, and how your property got from here to there.
Right.
And what rules apply to the land that you stand on. Who has that jurisdiction, as we said before? And who's
Ken,
crazy?
who has the jurisdiction?
We have the ultimate jurisdiction.
Who's we?
We are the individual citizens in our singular capacity. And we have been suborned, misled, in street parlance, directly lied to by a system that has constructed artifice through words.
Well, a lot of people would say, no, you guys don't know what you're talking about. There's laws that says they can do this, but you're saying that the law really isn't there to do what they're doing.
Well, you have to go back to the fundamental law of the Republic.
Right, the Constitution, right?
No.
This is what we focus on.
The fundamental law.
Oh, you mean back before that?
Yes, the Declaration of Independence.
Right, where we
And
talk about, you know, our individual sovereignty.
our individual sovereignty comes from God, not from the state.
Right.
Now, during the turmoil of the Civil War, the Revolutionary period of the 1770s, which was really over almost a 30-year generational battle that culminated on the battlefield, our founding fathers, the citizens of the day, fought for their right to stand upon their land. Right. Then after the cessation of hostilities and they came together to codify the government, they operated on the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, which gave a unicameral seat of Congress wherein the United States sat as the representative of the 13 states of America at that time. And they needed funding. Well, the states funded themselves, and the feds would pass the hat around, saying, hey, we need money. And they go, well, we ain't giving you any money today. We got to go reprimer the Jeep. So they said, well, we can't afford to maintain our international relations. We owe debt to France. We owe debts to Britain. We have to pay our bills. So they said, okay, they came together and goes, let's give the United States, i.e. the United States government, some physical standing, physical authority. So they gave them the ports of entry.
Right, yep, we got that in the Constitution.
And they said impost, excise, and duties.
Yes.
And they told the states who were destroying commerce because they had interstate taxes.
So you had to charge, like if I was selling between Virginia and South Carolina, there was a tax going on between that.
Right.
And the federal government eliminated that.
The Constitution eliminated that.
Right.
The states surrendered that authority to make commerce regular amongst the states.
Right, to regulate, to make regular, not to make it hard to do.
No.
To regulate meant to make it
easy.
regular.
Regular,
Yes.
regular, not
To encourage
regulate.
and foster,
Right,
correct.
and this is, again, words. And you have to understand the words. I would suggest buying a reproduction of the 1828 Webster's Dictionary so you understand the words of the day.
Again, we did a segment on change the word, change the world.
Right.
They're changing the words and meanings on these
Correct.
things. Absolutely.
And using that artifice, they've taken taxation to the extreme where within the state, they do not impose a direct tax. If the state has the authority to do so, they do not. They incorporate in the Constitution ad valorem, excise, privilege taxes, ad valorem taxes, add value.
Right.
And they're taxing, the property is taxed, but it's taxed for its use. And its use is generally be a commercially regulated use. And you go back to before we restate the territorial laws, licensed use. They license you to cross the stream with a ferry.
Right.
They license you to run a tavern. And this was a business use, and then they would turn around and tax the business use.
And that's where the 16th Amendment come in on taxing income, and the Supreme Court said they had that the 16th Amendment didn't give the government any new powers of taxation, yet they're taxing individuals, and they changed the meaning of income as well.
Well, it's artifice. 16th Amendment is smoke and mirrors.
Right.
And the prevailing case was Bruce Shaber, and Bruce Shaber was a stockholder in the Union Pacific who was being diminished upon his dividends, upon distribution. And he had no claim to litigate the case. His case was dismissed for failure to state a claim upon which relief shall be granted.
Right.
And the court, as you rightly said in the dicta, said no, the 16th Amendment did not enlarge nor diminish what already existed.
Right.
It was smoke and mirrors.
Right, that's right, and several Supreme Court rulings have come down saying all the same thing.
Correct.
There is no new powers of taxation by the 16th Amendment.
Right.
Yet they're taxing us even on individuals
Well,
as well, based
then-
on that rule, right?
Well, no, they didn't. They are very shrewd in what they do. They created a systemic world of legal fictions. And let's jump 20 years forward to the wage taxes of the New Deal of 35. Let's jump to the amendment of those wage taxes in 39 under what we now know as FICA, Federal Insurance Contribution Act. And then when you read those 4 years of laws, you'll see we're not paying federal taxes inside the state. We're paying state-driven excise taxes collected by the feds. They're playing artifice. And with your taxes on your land, they've put us on the rolls because we didn't challenge them. And then when you don't know how they put you on the rolls, how do you know what to challenge?
We're going to get into these challenges, what you can or cannot challenge, and what really is the law and what's not, when we come back after these messages. And thank you for staying with us today on Liberty Town Halls. We're discussing the government's right to tax, whether you own your property, whether income tax is available. All these things are important to understand the timeline. Ken, Tom, we left off talking about basically a revisionist history of how the laws really don't apply to what they're being executed as today, right?
Well, the revisionist is not the part of the history. It's the revision back to when the laws that apply to a piece of property, your property, mine, or Ken's, you go back, all the way back, to find that the laws of the Congress assembled are the laws that still apply today. They haven't changed. They haven't changed one bit.
Well, there's still laws out there that say, you know, you can be arrested or jailed for doing something really stupid, and nobody enforces those laws. Like, you know, on some books it says if you steal a cattle, you can still be hung. They don't do that no more. So,
Too bad.
I mean, theft is bad, I know. But seriously, just because a law is still on the books, does it really make it a valid law today?
If Congress hasn't changed that law, it applies today as well as it did the day that Congress...
But not if no one's willing to protect and stand up for these rules. I mean,
that's
if you
what
have
we're
no way
trying-
of, if the courts aren't going to enforce it, if there's no legal recourse for someone to go to get these laws upheld, is the law really good?
Well, you have an Alice in Wonderland.
Oh yeah,
All
we're
right.
feeling that right now after
Okay.
this election, I'm sure of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We definitely stepped through the looking glass, unfortunately. It's legal fictions, originally defined as fictions of law. Fictions of law are falsities presumed to be true to perfect justice by devious means.
Right.
That's what they do.
But that's happened in numerous ways.
It's happened since they passed the first law. And laws are put out as coercions. Taxation's coercion. Taxation is regulation.
Well, wait a minute. We talked about regulation mean to make regular, to regulate.
Yeah, that's what it was supposed to be, but they turned it around and changed the meaning of the word. And this didn't start in the 30s. It started from day one with the Republic.
Is everyone treated the same in this game? I mean, is there a sense of fair play for everybody in this, or does different people get different rules to go by because of whatever reason?
Well, the collective is inequity. Yet the state constitutions of all the states and the federal constitution, we should all stand equal before the law, but these statutory legislators pass laws that make you more equal than me because of the nature of the law they wrap around you to believe is true. And the problem is...
So we're not equal citizens in this country no more?
Not under the statutory lands. And that's what's wrong.
Is this built up by what they call case law, one judge ruling off another judge ruling off another judge ruling?
And
it's been twisted that way? Nobody's going back and reading the original law?
Exactly. You have a scheme. And if you want to see the scheme, walk into any law library today, and you'll see the young students rolling around with laptops, hitting print buttons over to the master printer, and the law books on the shelves are covered in dust. They're not reading the law as written. They're not reading the history of that law that was applied. So they're ignorant in a reality that they're taught to be true.
But the judges are supposed to be up to speed on this, right?
The judges are up to speed, and the interesting point about the judge...
So they're just ignoring it then? They're saying, hey, I know this, but I'm going to find a way to twist it still?
Yes, the judges are the gateway to public policy. And that's
right,
what they'll
yep.
tell you. And that's the problem with litigation. That's the Bruce-Shaber decision. And in fact, the prime example is this recent National Federation of Independent Business with its 26 attorney generals challenging the Patient Protection and Healthcare Affordability Act, i.e. Obamacare.
Right. He likes Obamacare, so we're going to use Obamacare from now on this.
And,
I'd like to make our president happy.
It was not a proper litigation.
No.
Not at all. The claimants didn't have standing to litigate the question of the application of the individual mandate.
Have to have standing.
And there was no standing. Yet it's 184 case dicta rhetoric where they allowed them to legislate from the bench to convince everybody it's okay to tax you for non-use.
Well, it's like when they were passing this healthcare nightmare, is what I'd like to refer to it as. They were talking about this is not a tax on the people. This is not a tax. This is not a tax. Yet, when the president went and argued it before the Supreme Court to make the case, their office made it very clear this is a tax.
Well, the only thing government can do
is tax.
tax.
Right? So it's smoke and mirrors even getting a bill passed. I mean, like Nancy Pelosi says, you have to pass it before you find out what's in it. Well, this thing's this tall. I'm still trying to figure out some of these details. And as a businessman, I can't figure out what I have to do for employees. So they've twisted all these things in such a way.
Yes.
And now we got judges that really don't understand this law that are going to be making rulings on it. And then you got judges building case law on top of case law on top of case law until the original law is gone, is what happened with our property rights, right?
I was watching the Supreme Court in Michigan yesterday, and I'll give Robert Young, the Chief Justice, credit. There was a litigation in front of it, and his question to the attorneys, where's the statute, i.e. the written law, upon which you're basing your claim? And he was, I don't have it. And a second judge read a written law which was not applicable to the claim, but it was a written law which actually destroyed his position in front of the court.
And they still passed it and went along with it.
No, they didn't. He's going to lose his issue. Because when you go to these judges, if you don't bring the proper authority forward, you're going to get bad case decisions.
But wait a minute, isn't that the judge's job, is to make sure that, I'm not a lawyer, I'm counting on a judge to know the law so that I can be protected. He's supposed to be protecting the individual, not mob rule kind of mentality.
No, not necessarily.
No.
He's got to make sure that when a pleading comes in, if you don't plead your case properly and you don't have the correct pleadings in there, that's all he's going to look at and rule on.
Correct.
And that's it.
We'll continue this conversation when we come back after these messages. Welcome back to Liberty Town Hall as we discuss property rights and case law and whether we can trust the judges not to have changed the law one after another until we got something we don't really recognize and then we just accept it as, well, the judge says that's the way it's to go, or somebody passed a regulation that says this is okay underneath the law, and they kind of blind us into thinking this. But you guys are sitting here saying, if we know what the law is, then we would find out that they're committing fraud on us. Is that basically how it goes?
Yes and no. If you bring the law to the courtroom, they'll rule the law.
Okay.
If you fail to bring the pleadings properly to the courtroom, i.e. bring the law in, they're going to use your error to perfect the ideology of public policy. And it is an ideology.
So you're saying if I get my homework all done up, I can go into my local circuit court judge and say, Your Honor, I'm not paying property tax on this no more because you don't have the legal right to charge me tax. And you're saying the law will uphold that
The
position.
law will uphold it, but I assure you that circuit court judge will not.
So you're saying right there the judge is not going to uphold the law then?
No, he'll tell you, take me up on appeal.
Okay, so I go to appeal, and then what?
Then the appellate court in Michigan, which takes pride in the rule of law, you should perfect your standing.
I have a 50-50 shot?
You better than that.
Okay, what if I'm in New York or California or Florida or any of these other states?
It applies in whatever court
court
you're
you
in.
are.
If you have the correct pleading and you know what the law is.
But if this is the law, then how come we're still doing it? Nobody's managed to successfully change this around yet, challenge it?
We have I'm going to go back to my favorite terminology. It's the systemic fraud you're dealing with.
Systemic fraud. That's
systemic fraud.
systemic means it's
It's a system.
system-wide.
System
just-
designed.
Right, systemic, all
It's-
across the board fraud.
My wife says they have.
That's a pretty hard allegation.
They've struck the bonanza and they're not going to give it up. They're the wounded animal in the corner. They're going to strike back. And the favorite terminology of the entry-level trial court, which a circuit court is, because there's only one court in the state, it has 3 divisions.
Right.
Circuit, appellate, and a supreme. And the reason they tie you up by saying appeal me is cost.
So they figure they can win by nutrition.
Correct. They will break you. Because
Wow.
to take a case to the Supreme Court of the United States, just to get to the court on its own merit, it's $100,000 just to get from the appellate court to the Supreme Court of the federal government. $100,000 is what they want to charge you.
Why spend $100,000 when I can spend a couple $1,000s in taxes and be done with it?
That's how they do it.
Wow. Well, when we come back on our next show, we're going to talk about what we can really do and how to start the process. And guys, you will come back and get into this with us, right?
Be more than happy.
Sure.
I really can't thank you enough for bringing this very complicated yet very simple issue to the American public. And I know you're doing really well out here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Liberty Town Hall. That's all we can fit in today's schedule. Please join us next time as we get into personal property rights and the value of your dollar in that process. God bless.
Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters.